So here's the thing. For the longest time, I thought that personal finance was so effing boring. I knew I should be doing the thing. I knew I should be budgeting, but I just couldn't make myself, even though I knew I should be, even though I knew it was the responsible thing to do, I just could not get it together. I thought budgeting was boring. I thought investing was boring. I thought saving for the future was boring. Boring, boring, boring. I didn't want to do any of it. And I wanted to talk about this today because I feel like some people might be able to relate to that. And maybe you feel the same way. Like maybe the second somebody starts to talk about budgeting or investing, your eyes glaze over, you immediately nope out of there. Or maybe like me, you tried and failed over and over again to get your money in order. Like I did make some attempts in my 20s. Like I would track my spending and then quit after a couple days. Or I opened a high yield savings account and I would put money into it. And then a month later, I was just transferring it back into my checking account because I needed it to pay bills. So no matter what I did, it just felt like I could never get it together. Like I could just never get on track. And so maybe you feel similarly, and I want to talk about what changed for me. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a story time. When I was in my 20s, I moved overseas. I had never set foot outside of the US or Canada before when I kind of spontaneously accepted a job in Thailand when I was 23. So I kind of on a whim took this job. I moved to Bangkok, and I want to be really clear. I have zero regrets about this time in my life. Like it was an incredible time. I had so many opportunities to travel. And there are some things you really only can do when you're young. Like, of course you can travel later in life, but the fact of the matter is that experience is going to look very different when you're 40 or 60 than it does when you are 23 years old. So I really don't have regrets about doing it at that time of my life. I just want to be very clear about that out of the gate, that I don't regret my decisions to a point that I would undo the things that I did. The only thing that I do wish is that I had learned this one thing about money so that I could maybe have had a little bit more balance just to make sure that the rest of my life was going to look as amazing as my life in my 20s. By the way, my name is Kate. I talk about life and finances as a mid-30s woman, and if you are enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing. It really helps as I'm still a brand new baby YouTuber. Now back to the video. See, when I was living overseas, I was basically living paycheck to paycheck. Every long weekend, every holiday, I would be hopping on a plane, I would be traveling all over, and I really was not thinking about saving or investing for the future. It just felt so far off for me. It felt like something that I had lots of time to do. I was only in my early 20s. Like, why should I be thinking about retirement? And I did have random thoughts here and there, like, oh, I should be budgeting or I should be saving, but I just didn't have a why. None of it felt important to me. The one thing that I did know was that I should be paying off debt, and I did have a pile of student loans. So I did work to pay those off a little bit more aggressively. But beyond paying down debt, I just had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to save or invest or budget. So I just kind of didn't. And I will also say, there just wasn't access to the same level of education that we have today. So I moved overseas in 2010, which so obviously the internet existed in a kind of different form than it does today. Social media was very nascent. YouTube existed, also in a very different form than it does today. And Facebook existed. But the way that we have Instagram and TikTok now, where we have all of these content creators talking about debt payoff and money management and personal finance, none of that was really a thing in 2010. I'm sure you could have found some random blogs, but the reality is the information just wasn't in front of me. I wasn't being presented with any of this content. And so you did kind of have to go more out of your way to learn about personal finance. Certainly you could read personal finance books, which, again, I didn't really want to because I thought this stuff was so stupidly boring. I will say though, I did read I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, which shout out to Ramit. He's still that MVP, and he has, I think, some of the most well-rounded and balanced personal finance advice. And his book wasn't boring. It was actually an entertaining read and very informative. But even Ramit could not save me at that time in my life. The person reading the book has to want to implement the advice, and I just wasn't there yet. He planted some really good seeds, but I wasn't there yet. I needed to get there on my own. So then what finally changed for me? What finally made the switch go off in my brain to be dude, get it together. So when I was in my late 20s, I was working overseas in Malaysia. I was doing a research fellowship there. And so I was doing 4 months of fieldwork in Kuala Lumpur. So as part of this fellowship, I received a small stipend. And then I also had like my living expenses and travel expenses covered as well. Now, as I was coming to the end of my time in Malaysia, I realized that I had nothing. I had no money. I had no job lined up and nowhere to live. And so I realized I would be back in Canada in a couple weeks with like nothing lined up. And I started to panic. Like, as my partner at the time and I were traveling around Southeast Asia at the end of my fellowship, I was fully breaking down. I remember I was applying to jobs from random hotel lobbies, from random cafes. I remember I kicked him out of our hotel room in Chiang Mai at 1 a.m. to do a job interview. I was like, get out of here. I need to do this job interview. It's the middle of the night, but because of the 12-hour time difference, it was the only time I could do this interview. And I was like, I need to get a job. Like, I'm freaking out, man. So yeah, so I'm doing all of this while we're supposed to be having this nice vacation around Thailand and Vietnam. But that was kind of the irony of it. Like, I only had a couple grand to my name and I was spending it traveling around Southeast Asia. Like, I knew I was going to have like $0 when I got home. Ridiculous life choices. Looking back now in hindsight, I'm like, wow. Anyway, so that was the light bulb moment for me. That was the moment where I was like, oh my gosh, dude, you are almost 30. Like, you have nothing lined up. You have no money. You have no savings. You have no backup plan. You have nowhere to live. Like, I was going to crash with my boyfriend, but it really wasn't optimal planning or decision making. And I realized at that time, I never wanted to be in that situation again. That level of precarity and fear that I was feeling about my own basic ability to pay my bills and take care of myself, I never wanted to experience that again. So that was the light bulb moment for me. And so as that was happening, I finally started to read again. I started looking things up online, started finding books, and I stumbled across a concept that I think kind of changed my life. Like, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that. And the concept that I stumbled across was that of an FU fund. And an FU fund is quite similar to an emergency fund. And the premise of an FU fund is to have the ability to say FU to any situation that is not serving you. That could be a job, that could be a relationship, but essentially you have the ability and resources to walk away from any situation you don't want to be in. And that, I was like, oh my gosh, because there is nothing I love more than freedom. Like, see my 20s. All I wanted to do was travel and explore and gallivant around. So freedom was the absolute most important thing to me. And for some reason, the FU fund made it click. I was like, oh, like, if you have a little bit of savings, you wouldn't be in this bind right now. If you have a little bit of savings, you're not forced to take the first job that you're offered, which was the situation I had put myself in and is what I ended up doing. I ended up having to accept the first job offer I got out of grad school because I really didn't have any options. And even just having a month or two of savings, you have so much more control and autonomy over your life. Like, no, you might not be able to quit your job and never work again, but you definitely are in much more of a situation to walk away from a toxic job. Like, if you go to work one day and something happens and you were like, I literally cannot come back here for one more day. And I think we've all had jobs like that. Then if you have even like a month or two of savings, it's like, okay, there's your runway. If you need to quit a job on the spot or something happens or you get sick or something goes wrong, you at least have a month or two to like figure something else out, to get a new job or to start doing some gig work. Maybe you get on Rover, maybe you start Uber Eatsing. Maybe you find a new living situation that's more affordable. The point is that it gives you that little bit of runway, that cushion, so that you have some time to figure it out. And I realized that this applies not just to jobs, but to relationships too. And as I was traveling around Malaysia, I realized, oh, I was putting myself really in a bind, because if ever in the future I was in a relationship that I didn't want to be in anymore, or I was in a living situation that I didn't want to be in anymore, I would be kind of stuck. Like, I would not be able to leave. I would not have the financial resources to leave. And that really scared me. That scared me enough to get my act together. And that exact situation did happen in my last relationship, and I was able to move out in 2 weeks. Like, within 2 weeks of splitting up, I had apartment hunted, found a new place, signed a lease, and moved out. And I was only able to do that because I had stashed away even more savings during the pandemic. So in the early years of COVID, I took all of the money that, obviously we were in New York City and we weren't able to travel. So all of the money that I normally would have spent on travel, on Broadway shows, on going out to bars and restaurants in New York, I just put all of it towards my savings and investments. And I was so relieved in that moment that I did that, because that was what gave me the freedom to make sure that I could move out right away. And like, I wanted that for both of our sakes. Like, I did not want either of us to have to be in a situation where we were still having to live under the same roof. And I'm really grateful that I was in a situation where I could do that, because that is not the case for many people. And I understand why. Like, having to put down first and last month's rent or first month in security somewhere, this is thousands of dollars now. It's so much money. And a lot of people are not in a situation where they could just do that on a whim. So I consider myself incredibly lucky and fortunate that I was in a situation where I could do that. But that did motivate me. Like, that fear is part of what motivated me to get my finances in order, because I never wanted to feel like I was trapped in a situation. And I think it's examples like that that really like made me realize, oh, personal finance is not boring. It's like the vehicle for how you live the rest of your life. So if you want to have choices and options and freedom, you need money for that. Like, you just do. And so personal finance became a lot more interesting when I realized that. And when I finally had that why, I was motivated to sit down and learn about it. And don't get me wrong, it was still kind of a grind. Like, I'm not a naturally frugal person. This stuff did not come easily to me. I had to try 50 different budgeting techniques before I found something that worked for me. And now I have been using the same approach for the last 7 years. So I finally found something that works for me, and I've been able to stick to it. But prior to that, I had tried all the things. I had tried the apps. I had tried Mint. Mint did nothing for me. Like, I kept trying, and it didn't work out. So if that's you, don't feel disheartened. Like, you can keep trying and you can find something that will work for you. But at the end of the day, you do need your why. Like, you need motivation to do this, or you're not going to do it. Like, unless you have a really good reason to stop overspending, or to go out and find a way to make more money, or, to stop like using your credit cards and accumulating debt, or to like stop affirming and klarnaing things, you are just going to keep doing those things. Like you need a really good reason not to do those things. And that's what I was missing for almost a decade. Like, I just didn't have a reason. I thought of saving and investing as like, oh, that's for like when I'm 70 and I'm like 25. Why would I need to worry about that right now? And the thing is, it is about taking care of future you, but it is also about making sure you are good right now as well. And that is the part that I had been missing for so long. And having this rainy day fund, FU fund, emergency fund, whatever you want to call it, it really has radically changed my life multiple different times in the last 5 to 6 years. Certainly in that breakup when I wanted to move out right away, but also the following year, I was unemployed for about 5 months. And again, I was only able to do that because of all the savings I had accumulated during COVID. And the TLDR is like 2022 was just a really awful year. I was really going through it. I just needed a few months to regroup. Like, I think back on that time of my life and I'm like, what would have made that time way worse? Having to work 40 plus hours a week. And that's the thing. Having money doesn't fix your problem, or it doesn't necessarily fix your problems. Money fixes a lot of problems. But the things that were going on in my life were health related things, personal, interpersonal issues, relationship stuff. Like, money doesn't make those things go away. It doesn't fix those things. But money did take off an immense pressure from my life at that time. Not having to work a full-time job while I was trying to manage all of these other things and coordinate, my international move back to Canada. Like, that was just a huge gift that I do not take for granted. And having that FU fund, that emergency fund, is why I was able to do that. And I think like part of it is really like shifting your mindset to think of taking care of your personal finances as a radical form of self-care. It is one of the single best things you can do if you actually want to improve your life and care for yourself. And then money starts to feel really exciting and the world starts to open up and you can dream bigger, because once you get your basic finances in place, you can also start to envision more of what you want in the future. So for me, an example is that like I have never really thought about buying a home. It's always just felt very out of reach. I am from a high cost of living area. I grew up in the Toronto area and housing has been like just wild here for a really long time. And my finances were just never in a situation where I could even fathom beginning to save for a down payment. But I have started saving up for a down payment in the last year. And don't get me wrong, this is not an immediate goal. If I ever am able to buy a house, I still don't know if I ever will be able to achieve that goal. But if I am ever able to buy a house, it probably will take me 5 to 10 years. But the point is that I'm finally in a place where at least I can start saving for it. And then another thing I'm thinking about is in the next couple of years, as I'm approaching my 40th birthday, I would love to do something exciting that year, like take a few months off work, travel the world, maybe rent an RV and like drive around North America with my dog, or I don't know, just take some time off work on a project I'm excited about. Or maybe even it's just booking like a really big 40th birthday trip and paying to fly my family out somewhere amazing. And like I could treat my family to that. Like that's really exciting to think about. And that's soon. That's in like a few years. So we're not just talking about how to live better when you're 65 or 70 and beyond. This is about like, how do you live an amazing life right in the here and now? And the thing is, you just can't do that living paycheck to paycheck. Like whatever you dream about, whether that's retiring early or maybe it's being a stay-at-home parent and being able to be so active and present and involved in your kids' lives. Maybe it's renting the van and driving around North America or Australia or wherever you are. Maybe it's taking a sabbatical off of work and being able to pursue your own projects. Like whatever it is, you can't do those things until you have gotten your finances at least somewhat in order. And you really can't dream big when you are living paycheck to paycheck. And don't get me wrong, I understand the realities of our economy right now. I understand why so many people are living paycheck to paycheck. So this is not a condemnation or indictment of people at all. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, I completely understand why. So this is not to fault you or shame you, just to say that if you can slowly and gradually work yourself to a place where you are able to save a little bit, just starting to take those tiny steps to cushion yourself against unexpected things or emergencies, or like every little bit helps. But I understand that this is not possible for everyone right now. But money does get really exciting when you start to think of it that way. When you do start to think of it as a way of acquiring your own freedom, it can be that extra motivation you need to figure out how you are going to pay off debt, how you might be able to work a few extra hours to accelerate your debt payment, or whatever it might be. You really like figuring out that why does go a really long way. And I would love it if you could share in the comments what your why is, or if you had a light bulb moment like me, like what made it finally click for you. I think by sharing those kinds of things in the comments, it might be able to spark something for someone else. So thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you on the next one.